Social Security is a big scam topic for especially seniors. You might get calls saying, hey, your Social Security number has been compromised. It's been used in some type of criminal activity in Texas, and you need to pay us money because of you have a bond out or something like that. And this gentleman from the Senior Security Administration who handles this stuff all the time, he says, look, we really have to have a defensive mindset. It's unfortunate, but whether it's you have to have a defensive mindset for any time somebody calls you, anytime you get an email or a regular piece of mail that's purporting you with some kind of great offer. Even if you're walking out in the parking lot at your Schnucks and you're walking out to your car, you want to make sure that nobody's around so you can get into your car safely. Those types of things can really help. So you have to have a healthy dose of skepticism, unfortunately, to get by in the world today.
Life's Third Act is a podcast dedicated to helping you get the most out of your retirement. Sponsored by TuckerAllen, Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell features guests each week to discuss prominent topics for those over 55. Here's Attorney-CPA Joe Cordell.
Welcome to another episode of Life's Third Act. This week we're going to have back a guest that has been very popular in the past. It seems that anytime that there is some new crisis or some public health issue, anything that draws a lot of attention seems to be a fertile opportunity for people to do scams and other sorts of exploitation, especially of people who are older.
Right.
So maybe that's one reason that our guest today has been so popular with you, our viewers, and the reason we've had this guest back 3 times, at least maybe 4, probably 4 times. And I'll let you do the proper introduction, and then we'll plunge forward. But today's show, I think you'll find very useful to you in a very practical way.
Yes, today we have Don O'Brien back with us. He's an investigator with the St. Louis Better Business Bureau. Welcome back, Don. And we're talking about spring and summer scams, particularly targeting senior citizens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd like to kind of dovetail a little bit off what Joe had to say there at the beginning, Jill, is that, and thanks, by the way, thanks for having me. I love coming on with you guys. I love talking things over with you. And obviously, scammers are always going to hit in whatever's going on in the heat of the moment. Whatever the news of the day is, right, scammers are going to take advantage of, and seniors are going to be particularly vulnerable. Seniors have more money than the 22-year-old kid just graduating from a zoo this week. But they are going to have money, and obviously, right now, there are a couple big things in the news. One that you may think of seniors getting scammed out of some money. The other one, maybe not so much. The one that kind of might be off the beaten path is the whole baby formula thing. Right. Baby formula crisis right now. Obviously, senior citizens aren't out there actively looking for baby formula because, that's that part of their life is over.
Lots of grandmas.
Grandmas and grandpas, right?
Go ahead.
Exactly. Grandma and grandpa trying to help their child or even their grandchild. If they're a great-grandparent, there's many great-grandparents out there, might be trying to, scour the internet or look for things and see something pop up on their social media, their Facebook. And that's what we're hearing about right now. So, is the social media, basically the Facebook aspect of this scam, is that, every little town has its buy-sell trade group. No matter the community that you live in St. Louis, there's got to be something around there that says, oh, hey, if you live in Chesterfield, Wentzville, Jefferson County, wherever, Festus, wherever it might be, every little group has their own little buy-sell trade group. And what we've seen in real life here with the St. Louis BBB is that people are talking about people who infiltrate those groups saying, "Hell, I've got this baby formula." They show photos of the baby formula on their Facebook post and say, "Hey, I'll send this to you. I'll mail it to you in the U.S. mail. Just send me some money," and they'll ask for that money electronically. What happens is the person will purport they're from another area of the country, say, well, the one we had with a report over there, supposedly from Tennessee. And they said, hey, I can send you this formula if you just send me the money. And the person said, oh, okay, that sounds good. Sent the money, waited 10 or 12 days, nothing ever came.
Wow.
Because, they sent that. It's so easy to share money now with people that, it's easier for people to be scammed. And I don't exactly know how old that person was, but it's still for senior citizens out there who may be trying to help your younger family members or friends. be careful out there, especially in those Facebook groups. If you're going to do something like that on Facebook, what we prefer people do at the BBB is actually meet face to face. So that way, if you have the baby formula, I have my money, you exchange, and then you can have both sides satisfied.
So there's a general lesson here too. These so-called trade groups where people seem to have, there's some level of trust in these groups, and it's mainly on Facebook, it seems.
Yes.
I would think that there would be other people regarding other products or services that would sort of make their way into these groups and be able to pull off the same thing.
Without a doubt. There's no vetting of anybody. I mean, what we see is the Facebook group that was infiltrated here by somebody from the outside was a public Facebook group. Anybody in the world could go look at that community's buy, sell, trade, and they could post things on there. Now, some others of those are done the way that they probably should be, is they're private groups. You have to answer a question about that community, like, what's the nickname of the whatever town you are's sports teams, or something that lets people know that, hey, it actually takes you some effort to be a member of that group. You need to know something about that community. So if you're in a public group, just be aware that anybody in the world can post publicly to that page.
Don, you know what? It seems like seniors are more trusting because they grew up in a time when agreements were made, business transactions with a handshake. Documents weren't signed. And do you think that's also why seniors are targeted more, because of that mentality?
Without a doubt. I spoke to a senior group not too long ago, and I was talking about scams with them, and I was actually doing some work on an updated study that we're going to have come out here pretty soon. I was talking with somebody from the FTC. And that person, not the FTC, he was with the Social Security Administration. Social Security is a big scam topic for especially seniors. You might get calls saying, hey, your Social Security number has been compromised. It's been used in some type of criminal activity in Texas, and you need to pay us money because of you have a bond out or something like that. And this gentleman from the Senior Security Administration who handles the stuff all the time, he says, look, we really have to have a defensive mindset. It's unfortunate, but whether you have to have a defensive mindset for any time somebody calls you, anytime you get an email or a regular piece of mail that's purporting you with some kind of great offer, even if you're walking out in the parking lot at your Schnucks and you're walking out to your car, you want to make sure that nobody's around so you can get them into your car safely. Those types of things can really help. So you have to have a healthy dose of skepticism, unfortunately, to get by in the world today.
I agree with that. And,
I can see how in many ways, though, it is the perfect storm for our audience who is older. And in addition to the reasons we just mentioned, though, I don't think we should fail to mention that not by any means are all of us more vulnerable in terms of our judgment, but that people generally know that as people age, there often is some deterioration, and often more in some, to the extent that they are vulnerable to being exploited. So I think that definitely is a factor of what's going on here, is that some people are just not quite as sharp, quite frankly, as they were, 20, 30 years ago. So let's talk about other things that have come up. Something related, I've heard about events occurring because of this change in weather, and we've had storms, and so that always brings out contractors and other things. I mean, St. Louis area in particular has had some pretty severe storms this year. And I know that people have had trouble getting their electricity restored. They've had roof damage and all those things you normally think of.
Down tree limbs, down trees.
Yeah.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about what to watch out for relating to that.
Yeah, those types of things, Joe, are going to bring out your more nomadic contractors, men and women who go from they go from storm area to storm area across the country, and they will go door to door. So how can you protect yourselves against these people who may or may not be above board? The first thing you need to do, no matter where you live, know your solicitation laws for the area for which you live. Some places will have a rule Some cities, municipalities will say, hey, in order to solicit in our town, you need to come to City Hall. We need to give you a badge and you need to pay us a fee in order to go door to door for houses there. If that's the case, then when somebody comes knocking on your door, and this isn't for like the neighborhood boy or girl trying to sell pizzas for their soccer team,
right,
or the Girl Scout cookies. These are for people who are actually soliciting real business.
Well, if you get scammed on the cookies, that's probably not.
Well, yeah,
that's you too bad.
Yeah. So they're going to, they're going to try to sell. The first thing you need to do when anybody comes to your door and you want to talk to them for a solicitation, get as much info as you can. If you're in a community that has a solicitation permit rule, say, hey, can I see your solicitor's permit? Because in our community, you need to have that in order to operate. If they do not have one, you can obviously call local law enforcement, call their not hotline number, and just say, hey, we've got somebody in our neighborhood here who's going door to door and doesn't have a permit. And then what they'll basically do is with law enforcement, if they have the time, they'll basically come and just shush them away from there and maybe inform them what the laws are in that community. So that's number one.
But and let me also mention, though, on that topic, though, that a lot of homeowners associations, will privately agree that within that development that there are to be no sales of that sort.
Right, no solicitors.
Yep.
So really, and in that case, if you see anybody going around, you don't have to ask if they have a permit. You can still have them asked to leave. I don't know if I guess the cops intervene when you have that sort of rule in a
they'll come out.
It's not, okay. Yeah.
I've seen that happen in my neighborhood, actually.
Yep. Okay.
They'll shush them away or, just inform them, say, hey, if you're gonna solicit business in our city or our municipality, you need to do this. So, again, when you have that person there, don't be shy. Take a photo of their truck if they have a truck or their van, or ask for any kind of identifying information that you can. So that way, maybe it's not you that gets scammed. But what if it's your neighbor who may, if you have an elderly neighbor, you can take that information. And if you see that person stopping at his or her house for a long time, you can say, hey, what's going on with that? Did you engage that person? And, obviously with any of these contractors, you really want to do your research before you, whether it's a storm situation or not, you want to do research on that business. Obviously, bbb.org. Our Better Business Bureau website is a great resource to find out information about contractors, your roofers or whatever it might be. You'd have to have fence people, whatever it might be that needs to be repaired after a storm.
And another point, though, that I think that would help a lot everyone is to be sure and report these people. Among the other things or entities that you mentioned would be also to BBB. I mean, you rely on getting reports from people who've had bad experiences or even good experiences. And to the extent that you have a better database, that's helpful to everybody. And I think thankfully you do get a lot of reports, but I would like for those who don't report to BBB to keep in mind that's wonderfully helpful to everybody in your community.
It is. And Joe, you make a great point there in that, whether it's a scam attempt or whether it's, you actually paid somebody and they did a subpar work or they didn't finish your job. It's really always underreported. We figure that for the complaints we get for businesses here, we probably get maybe 10 to 15% of the actual complaint activity that's out there about that business. For scams, it's much lower. I know that we've talked on here on your show before about romance scams and things of that nature. We may be here between us and the FTC and the FBI. We may be here between 2 to 5% maybe of all of people who actually lose money in those things. Because again, as we talked in the past, those can be really embarrassing when you've lost money in those types of things. So yes, it is important to report. So that way, we can not that we're going to say, oh, hey, here's so-and-so, they lost $75,000 in a romance scam. We're not going to put your name out there, but that way the authorities know about it and when they can try to react to it once these things get reported.
Right. Don, I know several years ago, it was after a very severe storm and the storm ended. It was not even 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And a storm chaser is at my door. Guy claims he's from a roofing company and wanted to get up on my roof and to see if we had any damage. And of course, I told him bye-bye. But I can't think of, I can only imagine how many senior citizens, an 80-year-old widow, where this would happen. someone coming to the door, scaring them, saying, oh, your roof could have some major damage. How often do you hear stories like that from senior citizens? Do you get those type of reports?
We do. We do get those types of reports, and most of the time it is in that scenario that you're talking about after a weather event has occurred. And one thing that we need to remember is that when somebody comes to your door, there's no obligation for you to answer the door. There's no obligation for you to let them into your residence for sure. You're under no obligation to let them go up on your roof and that's that instance chill and to look at your damage. Now they have these roofers have toys, if you will. They could have these drones that can go up and supposedly see your roof without them having to get on top of it. Just be wary of letting anybody around your property like that unless you know them. Vet them first. Say, hey, can I have your business card? I want to do a little bit of information and we'll find out about you first, and then maybe set up an actual appointment with them the following day if they're a business you want to have on your property.
Wait a minute. They really do have drones, or is that just part of it? Really?
No.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I didn't even know that.
And often, though, fleshing out this scenario more fully is the victim may not, in fact, be the homeowner. In fact, it's often the insurance company. Yes. Unless, of course, there is, in fact, damage.
Right.
But the idea, the pitch that they're selling, and sometimes it's accurate, is that, look, let me look up there. If you have some damage, I can get you a free roof. And sometimes there's some imagination involved in terms of what's damage, or was this recent, or was this from long ago? And so the tug of war, and if we want to use the word exploitation, sometimes it's the insurance company that's getting hit and not so much the homeowner. And so sometimes homeowners are kind of passive, or maybe not so passive participants in that whole transaction. So I think homeowners need to realize that to the extent that it's a ruse to get money, that ultimately everybody pays for that. It results in higher rates for everybody.
It does.
Really, the bottom line is we want our insurance coverage to cover the things that it's supposed to cover, but we shouldn't participate with some of these contractors in trying to get coverage for things that aren't legitimately covered.
Right.
Yeah. And what happens there, Joe, is you make a great point that a lot of times what the contractor is going to ask that person to do is to sign over that insurance check. They'll just say, oh, hey, when whatever your insurance company gets that money, just sign that check over to me. They take the check and they run. Then all of a sudden, if there is indeed storm damage there, that person is, they're kind of out of luck because the insurance company's already made that payment. So again, when you're doing things with a company, the rule of thirds is always a great thing to follow. And the rule of thirds is you pay a third when you sign a contract, you pay a third of the money when they actually start work. And then you pay that final third only once you've gone over the final work with that company. Now that's going to be difficult with a roof, obviously, but a lot of other things you can actually inspect.
Yeah, and let me explain that a little further because I'm afraid that we may have lost some people. Often the arrangement is that the insurance company, when you have insurance on your property, you may think, well, they're obligated to pay a third party for the improvement, but that's technically not true. Your coverage says that if you've had a loss in value of your real estate and damage to a roof, for example. So let's say your house was worth $300,000 and now because of this roof, it's reduced the value by $20,000. So they fulfill their obligation. You'll get a check for $20,000, and sometimes people don't in fact improve their roof. Some people just decide to go spend the money. I think that's a bad idea, but still, it's your right legally because it's not fraud. You did have a loss of value in this example, so you get the money and you decide what to do with it. And so, for our listeners' benefit, what Don's explaining is that sometimes the roofer will say to you, "Now, when you get that check, you need to sign it over to me." And often, a homeowner will think that they're obligated legally to give that money to somebody to fix the roof. While it may be a good idea to have the roof fixed, they don't have a duty to do that. And furthermore, as you point out, Dawn, to simply sign the check over is almost always a mistake.
Right.
Now, one other thing is, I would push back as a lawyer advising a client. I would be a little more aggressive than you described, Dawn. I know what you said is a general rule, so I don't want to challenge that. But you do have what's called mechanic liens regarding improvements to a house. So one can argue to a contractor that look, yeah, we know you need money to buy supplies and materials, and that's fair. But the idea that you normally pay as much as you typically would in a contract is, one could argue, unnecessary, because they're protected by laws that say you have a mechanic's lien, meaning they can file a lien on that property and you can't engage in any transactions relating to your property. So the law does protect people who come and do things on your real estate, and that's called a mechanic's lien. But there are legitimate arguments against that, and that's the reason what Don mentions is commonly demanded, because people may say, well, yeah, I could get a mechanic's lien on your house, but that may still have me getting paid far into the future, even though I'm guaranteed in a sense of someday getting it. I need it this year, for example, not 5 years from now. Yeah. So what Don says is, yeah, it's reasonable to ask for money up front. Be prepared to do that, but never sign over that check. You don't owe the check to anybody, quite frankly, unless you hire them to do that work.
Deposit it in the bank, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, Don, paint a picture. Give us a real life case of a senior citizen, after a storm that's been contacted by one of these bad actors, whether it be a roofer or someone to remove a tree that fell after a storm. Well, how does this typically play out?
Yeah, trees. That's a great point. And Joe, we see a lot, especially with seniors. They'll find the older houses in the older neighborhoods, and they'll think that I don't know if they can tell them by what you've got on your front door stoop or not, but they have a good way of finding senior citizens. And you have an incident where you need a tree trimmed or something, or a tree falls in your yard, and they'll see that. And those tree trimming services are even a little bit more nomadic than what those storm chasers are. They're all over the place. They'll come and they'll say, "Oh, Jill, you've got a problem with your tree there." And we've heard from seniors who've lost $4,000 or $5,000 to these tree trimmers. They'll come after a storm. They'll give them a kind of a song and dance, saying, "Oh, you know what? It really looks like you need help. You're a senior citizen. We want to help you." And they will either do no work, or they'll do some work. They'll cut the tree down. I heard from a senior not too long ago, is over in the Springfield, Missouri area, which is also part of our coverage area for St. Louis's BBB. And it was after a storm. They paid this company about $2,500 to deal with some trees. Well, they got maybe about a third of the work done. One of the trees they did cut down, but they left it in the person's yard, covering the sidewalk and everything. It did damage to their whole their yard. Yes,
their landscaping,
everything. It just fell over, and then they took the money and they never came back. They had another tree or two they were supposed to cut down. So then this person has this tree in their yard. They had to hire another company to come get it and to cut it down and do everything. So again, that person said that they fell victim to kind of an emotional plea made by the company saying, "Hey, we want to help you." They purported they were doing it at a discount for them. They were doing them a really good deal. Again, if you're going to I know it's difficult, and especially in the time of a storm, to get 2 or 3 estimates. But if this is just regular work, always try to get multiple estimates on a job, so that way you're not just taking the first person that comes along.
I have to ask, did that person recoup their money? Did they find the bad guys?
No, they were in the wind.
And realistically right now, we've gone through what I can say in my lifetime, I've never known such a shortage of hiring people to come and work on your house. And of course, we can say a shortage in virtually every profession right now. I mean, maybe we go back to the 70s. It might have been similar for a while, but I don't think so. I was very young then. Of course, you weren't born yet, Jill, but you have to take my word for this.
I was a very little girl.
So, I mean, the bottom line is you have to take what you can get. So when people ask contractors to come, they don't show up, or they give you a completion date and they're off. And you might hear in my voice the voice of experience on this topic, because right now I've been dealing with that, where I'm having work done on our house, and They're about 6 months off schedule.
Right.
I mean, it's so frustrating. And I think that in terms of people who are likely to take advantage and not show up and kind of leave homeowners in the lurch, there's something about that field. And I'm not picking on contractors, but I'll tell you that more than most professions, in my judgment, you have a lot of people who you cannot count on to do the quality of work you normally would, or to even show up on time, and et cetera. Not that there aren't people in the profession who can do it correctly. That's not my complaint. There are ethical people in the profession.
Sure, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is you can't get them, so you settle. And you must have a lot of people who have communicated with the Better Business Bureau because they settled for somebody who showed up, whether they just knocked at their door or they saw an ad. They phoned these people. They knew nothing about it. They just saw a little 2x2 ad in a neighborhood newspaper.
The one thing we hear, Joe, all the time is that, gosh, I wish I would have checked with the BBB first. Because if they would have checked with the BBB first, they would have seen the track record that some of these businesses have. They take they take the word of a friend, or again, that's sometimes what these contractors do. They'll say, "Oh, I'm working for your neighbor down the street."
Right.
And then they'll say, "Oh, can I do work on your property too?" Like these tree trimmers are ones that use that all the time. So, oh, really? You're working for my neighbor? What's his or her name? What's their address? I'd like to go talk to them to see what their experience is with you. Oftentimes we don't take that extra step, and maybe older Americans see that as a oh my gosh, I don't really want to inconvenience my neighbor. If this guy says he's working for my neighbor, well, gosh, I'm just going to trust him because he looks trustable. And again, use that defensive mindset.
There's no one else.
Yes, there's no one else. So always be a little wary, and contracts. Joe, I know you deal with contracts all the time in what you do, but try to make sure you get a contract in place before any work starts, because if there's not, and then, if you all of a sudden this person shows up your doorstep, you say you agreed to get them $2,000 to get these trees out of the yard and they don't do anything, then you're just in a mess without any kind of contract at all.
Don, are you familiar with that website, Nextdoor? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Every neighborhood has that. And it's really a great site. Neighbors will get on there and say, hey, can you recommend, a good tree trimmer or someone to build a deck or whatever? Yeah.
It's called Nextdoor?
Nextdoor.
Yep.
Every community has it, and you sign up for it, whatever neighborhood you're in, or parents looking for a baby.
Little community. Yep.
Yeah, it's a community type thing. And, and I have actually found repair people on that site, for minor things. And the neighbors, there would be like several neighbors recommending this particular person. But I do remember somebody on there, and this was in my neck of the woods. In fact, we called this guy to get an estimate. And there was something about him that seemed shady, and I was so glad that we did not use him, because later on, in fact, it was the senior citizen that hired him to do some work, and he didn't finish the job, so she posted his picture all over the place, and I said to my husband, oh my goodness, that's that guy.
That's that guy. Yeah, you betcha. Yeah. So, and what if something like Nextdoor, that's almost like a different version of that, Facebook community group where, you might have, for those buy-sell trade groups, every town also has their other, hey, this is what's happening in whatever the name of the town might be, or something along those lines. So that's a great place to share information. But again, make sure that you're actually getting it from the source rather than somebody who might be purporting to be from that area saying, oh yeah, great, Joe Blow did a great job with constructing my house, and then that just can lead people to make sure that you actually go and see things. If you get a recommendation from someone, say, hey, can I come over and see what he did to your bathroom, what he did to your fence, or whatever it might be, so that way you can kind of inspect that work to see how good it is.
Now, have you had complaints from people that found a bad actor through that website?
No, I mean, not necessarily. We don't. A lot of the times, we'll hear people that will go online and get online recommendations. And again, the one thing about online recommendations you need to realize is that let's say I'm just Google for whatever. Google is an example. A lot of people go to Google for reviews. They are not vetted. Anybody can put any for Joe's law firm, if they want to put up some maybe they don't. I love Joe's jacket today, but let's say I don't like Joe's jacket, and they can go on there and say, "Oh, that Joe Cordell, I can't. I would never hire him just because they don't like his jacket." Now they might not saying about his jacket, but maybe they just rub him the wrong way somehow. BBB, everything you see on BBB are customer reviews, obviously our complaints. If you do a customer review to BBB, we vet that out. We verify them. All those are verified. Facebook's the same way. A Facebook review, those can be doctors as well. If I start my own Facebook page, my business, I could get 5 of my buddies to go on there and say, "Hey, write some good things about me. How about I did a great job at your house." So that's what we hear from people. They go to some websites that may not have verified reviews, and they say, "Oh, I hired him or her on the basis of that." So always remember, I'm a journalist by trade. So one of the first things that they taught me was always consider the source. Consider the source of where you're getting your information before you decide whether it's law or not.
Yeah. And reviews have been famously subject to manipulation, and Yelp really tried to deal with that. Yelp's existence hinges on their ability to have legitimate reviews.
Right.
And if they don't, then Yelp has lost all utility.
Correct.
So I was impressed that they're in response to a backlash about reviews that was occurring in a lot of places. They demonstrated, in my mind, that they do take a special effort. But without that, reviews are just a scam.
Yeah.
It's a total scam. Anybody who has a business can get a bunch of people to give reviews.
You can, and there are people that actually sit there at their home and people will get paid to do reviews. I found people who may they may live overseas, but they're giving reviews about a diner or some kind of restaurant in Milwaukee, a contractor in Dallas, Texas, and whatever it might be in California. I mean, it's just and it's as Joe said, they're very easily manipulated.
Can you talk? I want to have you talk, if you can, about it's a complicated subject about people who go online, as older people do now. And again, I'm stereotyping, but for the most part, older people are not quite as facile online in the digital world as their 30-year-old, as my daughters. Okay, sure. I'm a good example of being not as facile in the digital world as my daughters. But there's so much skullduggery in terms of people who get into other people's computers. They'll send them an email, and once they've opened that email, they unleash some sort of virus or spyware, and suddenly they have access to move freely in that person's computer. And to me, that is scary. I think of my mother, who's 86 years old and who's on the internet all the time. Now, she's fairly sharp, but is she sharp enough to see the things that my daughters would pick up on? No, she's not. And can you make any comments on how can people feel more secure being online as an older person?
Yeah, the best thing you can do if you're if you're 18 or 80, Joe, 84, whatever, how old your mother is, 18 or 80, whatever it might
86.
be. 86. Okay. God bless her. I hope to make it there one day. You can, again, never, don't click on any links, whether it's in an email, whether it's in a text message. Don't ever drive your car, so to say, without knowing where you're going to. So what happens there, and we hear it again and again, yes, a lot from seniors. They'll be working on their computer, and all of a sudden something will pop up, and there might be a high-pitched sound saying, "Oh, this is Microsoft support. You need to call us at 1-800 so-and-so."
Right.
And then so because we've gotten a lot of good education about this. So this doesn't happen as much now as it did maybe 5 or 10 years ago. But it still happens. People still prey victim to this. They'll call the number and they'll say, "Oh, I've got this number," and then they're knowingly calling a call center, more likely overseas and probably in India, saying that they need to have things done to their computer. We had woman who's a senior citizen who owns a business up in Quincy, Illinois, which is about 2 hours north of us here. And that's part of our service area in BBB, who had one of these pop up on her business computer. And she's like, oh, okay, well, they're going to give her the latest software to help her, help keep her safe, supposedly, from whatever pitfalls there might be out there. Spyware, they're going to put up a quote unquote firewall for her. They didn't do anything for her. They just took her money every 2 years. This happened like 9 or 10 years long, she said.
What?
She'd give them $2,000 every 2 years for quote unquote tech support. And they'd come back 2 years later, ask her again. Come back 2 years later, ask her again. It's finally after about 4 or 5 times, and again, we're 8-10 years into this, she says to me, look, I finally figured something was fishy because she actually took her computer to a trusted computer place in Quincy, and they said, look, she asked them about this firewall protection she had from this business. And the computer guy's like, look, there's nothing on your computer that's other than what's on the factory updates.
The factory, yeah.
Correct. So, there's a woman who, business owner, very sharp, but again, trusted these people and trusted this screen thing that popped up on her screen and lost about $10,000 over a 10-year frame. So, so they bleed you. They just kind of nickel and dime you. That's why people think, scam victims, they can lose a lot of money, but it's hardly ever in one fell swoop. It's always, they're just going to kind of cut you every now and then, just get enough out of you to that way make sure they can come back to you. So if you do, talking about this computer instance, if you get a phone number, actually, try to make sure it's a legitimate number before you call anything. Just because they have that number there, believe it or not, sometimes the scammers will buy targeted ads on Google because they know that people are going to go to Google a number. If they have a fake number, they might buy some targeted Google ads to say, oh, this is a computer, some kind of computer service company or computer tech company that has some type of affiliation with Microsoft. And of course, they have nothing to do with Microsoft or Apple. You name it. Again, they'll try to get people to fall into those traps.
Yeah, and once the money's gone in that world,
it's gone.
It's somewhere in Eastern Europe, or there's nobody to arrest.
Yeah,
because she was paying with wire transfers, and they were going bank to bank, and the bank obviously on the other end was nowhere around here. So it was the money's gone. So again, if I could have any rules to live by. And I've been doing this investigating thing with the BBB now for 5 years plus. It would be A, don't ever click on any links, and B, never pay any gift card. And Joe, you and Jill know each other. Give each other a gift card when it comes to Christmas time, but never give a gift card to somebody who you do not know, especially when they're asking you to pay some type of some kind of debt. That's always
right.
Bogus.
Yeah. That's a red flag there.
Yep.
Don, a lot of people move, as you know, during the warm weather months.
Yep.
And of course, senior citizens, we know, end up downsizing, going into a retirement facility, a condo, whatever. So I'm sure a lot of seniors are targeted during this time of the year with moving companies.
They are. This May is National Moving Month. This is the time of year between May and August. We at BBB get more than half of our inquiries about moving companies during this time frame, during the summer months, if you will. If you're going to move, if you've lived in St. Louis for, you've lived in your house for 30 years, and you're looking to move, maybe you're moving somewhere where your children are now, and we see it a lot more, Jill, on long distance moves. If you're moving, and that's not to say that there aren't bad, your local moves. More often than not, we just hear about people whose goods get damaged in the process. When you make those long distance moves, that's when people need to be really careful. You always need to be careful because they've got your life's worth of goods on their truck. But that's when we hear about people who really get scammed. And the number one thing, red flag there, if you're going to use a moving company, they're going to want to give you an estimate of how much it's going to cost. A good moving companies that are accredited by the Better Business Bureau across the board, they will come to your house and say, okay, let's look at all the stuff you have, and they'll make an inventory. They'll actually do an on-site inventory. If that business will not come do an on-site inventory and wants to do everything remotely or over the phone, they were able to use COVID as an excuse for a while, but that's not really the deal.
That's a red flag.
Yes. I moved once during COVID, and, I made sure we had somebody come to our house, even during COVID, there were protocols put in place. But you're exactly right, Joe. It is a red flag, because what happens is you give them everything in your house. You could be right down to the last, paper clip that you have to tell them that we've got. But the unscrupulous ones are going to say, "Oh, well, guess what, Jill? You have more than you told us, and you're going to have to pay us, a couple extra $1,000 more on the day of the move." So you're in a bad spot at that point, because you need to be out of that residence, because either your lease is up or you've sold residence. And you need to be out.
And a more general comment about what you're saying is that an estimate is not a contract price.
Correct.
So a lot of people think that if they have an estimate, that what the other side of the table has done is they've agreed to deliver that service or product for that price. No, that's the reason it's an estimate. So there's lots of room in the word estimate for variation, and sometimes wild variation. So what you want is a bid. A bid is, if it's properly constructed, a bid's going to tell you exactly how much this is going to cost. Now, it might give 2 or 3 numbers based on very specific things. That's okay too, because it's still specific. But unless moving companies are the worst, because you get in a position where there are these big burly guys in your house. This is the way it goes down. These big burly guys are in your house. It's probably 7 o'clock in the evening in the new house. And so they've been working all day. They've unloaded. And a guy at the very end, they're putting their stuff in the truck. And a guy very end comes up to you with a pad or with a piece of paper. And he says, "Look, this is the number." And, you feel like you're not in a position to argue. So if it's, "Look, we had this additional time we put in, we didn't foresee," or moving that antique furniture ended up taking us 3 times as long. I've seen this happen. I don't know. I don't think it was fraud in our case. This has been a number of years ago. But the guy thought that because they ended up spending a lot more time, that here he is. I'm gone to California that day, literally. I was in California. My wife was doing the move. You can tell how good a husband I am. So I get out of town. The move's going on. And so this guy comes upstairs to her at the end and says, "Look, it's additional." I don't remember the exact number. It's at least $1,500.
Right.
And she felt like she wasn't in a position to say no. Not that he threatened her. He didn't. But she just felt uncomfortable. And I don't know what. I don't remember how we worked it out. I remember it was a dispute. I think she paid him part of it, and then we negotiated the rest. But the bottom line is you don't feel like you have any control.
Correct.
And my wife's a lawyer, and she still felt that she had to concede something. So it's not a good situation to be in. I'm glad you brought that example up, because I do think that people don't realize how vulnerable they are with movers, long-distance movers. Any other comments on that? I interrupted you.
Yeah, no. The one thing I was going to say is that, when you do make that call, that initial call to a mover, and they want to do that phone estimate for you, a lot of times that is done by what's called a moving broker. It's not the people who actually move you. They will then take that and they'll give it to another company, say, "Hey, we've got this. Jill wants to move. We gave her this estimate. Here, you take it from there." And then the consumer is then confused on who are they dealing with. Are they dealing with the people they initially called, or they now have this moving company over here that's actually doing the actual move? We see a lot of fraud in that. So really, I guess to case to the bottom line, and I'm going to sound like a real company guy here, but if you look at the bbb.org website and you find a mover that's accredited with us, we've done all the background work in checking those out. And then, you can have kind of a peace of mind knowing that if something does go wrong, you have an outlet in the BBB to go to. These moving companies, these moving scams that we see, it's so tough because, okay, if you move from, let's say you're moving from St. Louis to Ohio, and you have somebody that's you have a problem with your move. Well, who do you go to? Do you go to the authorities in St. Louis? Do you go to the authorities in Ohio? It's an interstate transfer of goods. You don't know who has jurisdiction there. So if you go with a company that has a good track record and is accredited by us, if something does go wrong, at least you can come to BBB and say, hey, something happened with me in this company. And that company, because they're accredited with us, they have to make a good faith effort to resolve that dispute. Now, that doesn't mean that whatever Jill says is right in that dispute. That just means they have to come to some kind of common ground, or else they could lose that accreditation. So, and there's, the U.S. Motor Transport Authority, they have a lot of different other things that they deal with. The U.S. DOT, the U.S. Department of Transportation, that's what I meant to say. They're the ones that kind of oversee the moving industry a little bit, but, it's really hard for them to deal with complaints.
And then you have, another agency we should mention is each state has its own attorney general's office that has a division focusing on consumer fraud in that state. So you'll find some listings if you go to the website of companies that are forbidden or are not authorized or are authorized in the state. Some states require that authorization before you do business. And if there isn't a company there, they can't do that. Insurance companies are an example, banking and other things. I don't know if moving companies fall in line, but certainly that's a place to report anything that wasn't proper. One other thing I would mention from a lawyer's perspective, whenever somebody signs that contract, if they're going to be in the new state, they want to be sure that if there's language in that contract that's put under their nose that they initially sign, if there's language about jurisdiction or venue, those typically what the paragraph will be called, that will often, if it's a very seller-oriented or a vendor-oriented contract, then it's going to require that you bring any legal action in their home court, which puts you at a disadvantage. Sometimes the companies will be based in a third location, which could be Georgia, for example, Atlanta, Georgia. So you could end up having to bring an action for any complaint you had. If they damaged your furniture, et cetera, you have to bring an action in the place that their contract says you can bring it. And sometimes the contract will say things like it will not allow a lawsuit with a court. Instead, you have to do binding arbitration with their professional association, whatever that is. So that means that they don't have much cost if you bring an action. So and it'll often have a provision that the loser does not pay attorney fees. They cannot be ordered. Nobody pays anybody's attorney fees. All these provisions are often in the fine print or toward the conclusion of a contract. And while there's a tendency to blow past those, but as to everything we've talked about today, moving, whether it's these contractors and subcontractors that come to your property, in all those cases, that contract that's given to you, that's what's lawyers call it an adhesion contract. It's not individually negotiated. It's something that's really imposed on you. And so I know our people watching us today are not lawyers, but even if you're not a lawyer, and even if you're not going to take it to a lawyer, and I realize it's not practical to have everything you do at your house, you take it to a lawyer. I understand that. But I also know that many of you can go to those pages and understand that language, understand it enough to where if there is a red flag, you get it. I mean, at least an alarm will go off in your head and say, whoa, this is talking about jurisdiction, and there's mention of Georgia here. Or stating that any dispute has to be resolved by binding arbitration with their professional body governing their organization. So, you're required to essentially go to their friendly forum to discover it. And you've waived your opportunity to go to a court of law and get a solution. So be careful and look for that language on these contracts. And again, it's enough for you to see those red flag, those phrases, several of which I've mentioned just now. And once you see that, hit the pause button. Don't sign it until you do. I hate to tell you this. Go to a lawyer and let them sign off on it.
Yep.
It shouldn't be very expensive to do that. I mean, a lawyer can look at something like that and take the red pen and go through it in 30 minutes, really. I could.
Yep.
And Don, senior citizens have accumulated a lot of stuff over the years, antiques, all kinds of valuables, jewelry. Have you ever had any cases, especially with a long distance move, where the movers, will target those people and steal those goods and
stuff disappear, right?
Yeah, disappear. Well, we didn't pick up anything like that. No.
Stuff disappears, and also stuff sometimes doesn't even get delivered on the backside of things. For those really bad movers, is that they'll keep your goods hostage. We hear horror stories about that a lot, where people will, when you do some of these, again, if you deal with if you deal with a good mover, you don't really have to worry about that. But these bad movers, and I'm using air quotes, they will they'll say, okay, well, we got your stuff, Jill, and we'll have it to you sometime within the next 24 to 28 days, or they might have a window where they'll deliver, because they want to make sure that, if your stuff doesn't fill up a truck, they may take two moves together in the same area. So that way they can try to save money on the actual shipping portion of the thing.
Really?
And then they just never get stuff. Oh yeah. And then they'll say, in order to get your stuff, you have to pay us X number of thousands of dollars over the bid. So yeah, it's really, if you're going to do a move, I know we always like to save money on things, but that's not the time to cut corners. You got to
absolutely not.
You have to find someone, especially your senior citizen, especially for your seniors out there who again have this great amount of goods and things that are sentimental to you. You want to make sure those sentimental items that have no cost to anybody else but yourself get to you from point A to point B.
Yeah, and the very expensive individual things, you don't have to turn over to them. You can handle that yourself.
Yeah.
If it's small enough.
Right.
But I would also advocate, and we've done this, where you take pictures of like a set of dishes, and it's easy to see that there are no cracks and that the handles are not broken off on
inventory, everything, documenting it. That's
and
a
pictures,
good idea.
Now you can do pictures in a way you never could before.
Right.
Yep. And the good moving companies are going to do that inventory with you. They'll do it right alongside you. They'll say, take all the photos you want. It's those ones that are like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you taking photos of things? Those are the ones that might be a red flag. So yeah, moving, this is the time of year that people do that a lot. And, it can be very hectic. There's nothing, there's maybe changing jobs might be a little bit more stressful, but that usually might come with a move as well. So moving can be very stressful, especially, if if you're a senior citizen, you've lived in a place for 45 years, your kids have all moved out, you want to go somewhere downsized smaller, you've probably just gotten rid of a lot of things, and you want to make sure the stuff that you still have gets from point A to point B safely.
Well, time flies when we have you on, Don.
We could just talk for hours, couldn't we?
Yes, we could, because there's so much mischief out there.
A lot of mischief.
In any case, I know why these conversations are of interest to our viewers, because there are so many people who feel vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I know this has been helpful. We need to do this again. Time flies. We're at what, 50? Justin, we're at 51 minutes. See, we had set this for 45 minutes. So you always do this to us, Don. But it's a good thing.
I'm talkative, Joe. I can't help it.
It's a good thing.
We like that about you.
So,
yes.
So anyway, we will have you on again. There'll be further conversations about how to make your life better and safer as you age. This has been another episode of Life's Third Act. Till next time, take care.
You've been listening to Life's Third Act, a podcast for thriving in retirement, sponsored by TuckerAllen, your estate and elder law advisors. Each week, we discuss topics and answer questions to help you better plan for your future. For more information, visit TuckerAllen.com. Subscribe and listen again next week for another edition of Life's Third Act. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements.